There is a seductive trap in the world of aviation that catches even the most prudent financial mind. It begins late at night, usually with a glowing screen and a browser tab open to an aircraft sales listing. You see a machine that looks incredible. It has the ramp presence of a corporate transport, the speed of a getaway car, or the futuristic lines of a sci-fi movie prop. And then you see the price tag. Your heart skips a beat because the number seems impossible. It is priced lower than a battered training aircraft from the 1970s. You start doing the mental math, convincing yourself that you have found the deal of the century, a hidden gem that the rest of the market has somehow overlooked. But in aviation, the market rarely overlooks anything. When a sophisticated, high-performance or unique aircraft is selling for the price of a used luxury sedan, it is not a bargain, it is a trap. It is a financial warning label, printed in invisible ink, waiting for a signature to reveal itself in the form of ruinous invoices, grounded airframes, and parts that simply do not exist anymore. We are not talking about airplanes that are merely old or slightly inefficient. We are talking about aircraft that have aged like milk rather than wine, machines that are so punishing to maintain, so frustrating to fly, or so notoriously unreliable that their values have plummeted into the basement. These are the cheap planes that effectively cost infinite money to keep in the air. Today we are going to walk past the shiny paint and the low acquisition costs to look under the cowling at the engineering nightmares and market realities that turned these 5 specific models into financial pariahs. If you value your bank account and your sanity, you need to understand why these sirens of the sky are singing so loudly, and why seasoned pilots walk the other way when they see them on the ramp. Welcome to the channel. If you appreciate deep dives into the harsh realities of aircraft ownership and want to avoid the 6-figure mistakes that others have made, make sure to subscribe and hit the like button. Now, let's inspect 5 small planes so bad they are being sold for ridiculous prices. 5. Beechcraft Duke B-60. If there were an award for the most visually stunning piston twin ever manufactured, the Beechcraft Duke B-60 would likely take the gold medal every single time. It is, without hyperbole, a masterpiece of aesthetic design. With its swept tail, rakish nose, and aggressive stance, the Duke looks like it is moving at 200 knots, even when it is chocked on the ramp. It exudes a level of class and power that suggests the owner has truly made it. When it was introduced, it was the private airliner for the pilot who wanted to fly above the weather in pressurized comfort, surrounded by club seating and thick leather. Today, you can find listings for Beechcraft Dukes that are shockingly low, sometimes hovering around the price of a basic fixed-gear single-engine Archer or Skyhawk. To the uninitiated, this looks like the steal of a lifetime. You get twin-engine redundancy, pressurization, and massive ramp appeal for pennies on the dollar. However, the Duke is perhaps the most dangerous financial trap in general aviation history. The problem lies under those elongated aerodynamic cowlings. The Duke is powered by 2 Lycoming TIO 541 engines. These are not your standard run-of-the-mill Lycomings that you find in a Piper Navajo or a Baron. These are exotic geared turbocharged beasts that were designed to produce massive power at high altitudes. When they are running perfectly, they are magnificent. But they almost never run perfectly for long, and when they reach their time between overhaul, TBO, the financial reality hits like a sledgehammer. Overhauling a pair of TIO 541 engines is not just expensive, it is astronomically prohibitive. We are talking about numbers that can easily exceed $120,000 to $150,000 for the pair, assuming you can even find a shop willing to do the work and source the rare parts. The cylinders are rare, the camshafts are rare, and the expertise required to tune them is dying out. Furthermore, the Duke is a maintenance hog on the airframe side. It utilizes a complex pressurization system that requires constant upkeep of seals and controllers. The tail structure is constructed with magnesium to save weight, a brilliant engineering decision in the 1970s that has turned into a nightmare in the 2020s. Magnesium is highly susceptible to corrosion, much more so than aluminum. If a Duke has spent any time near a coast or has not been obsessively treated with anti-corrosion agents, the tail skins can rot away, leading to airworthiness directives and repairs that cost more than the hull value of the airplane. The fuel burn is another shock to the system. The Duke guzzles avgas at a rate that makes a private jet seem almost reasonable in comparison. You are feeding two hungry monsters to drag a heavy pressurized cabin through the air. The market knows this. The market knows that buying a Duke for $100,000 is just the entry fee to a club that charges you $50,000 a year just to keep your membership active. That is why they are cheap. You aren't buying an airplane. You are buying a liability with wings. Owners often sell them out of desperation, hoping to find a dreamer who sees the lines but ignores the logbooks. 4. Mooney M20J 201. It might seem unfair to include the legendary Mooney M20J, also known as the 201, on a list of planes with ridiculous prices due to being bad. After all, the 201 is widely regarded as one of the most efficient airplanes ever built, famous for squeezing 201 miles per hour out of 200 horsepower. However, there is a dark underbelly to the Mooney market that has resulted in a specific subset of these aircraft being sold for suspiciously low prices, creating a trap for the bargain hunter. The Mooney M20J is a precision instrument. It is built with a steel tube roll cage cabin surrounded by an aluminum skin, utilizing a laminar flow wing that is incredibly slippery aerodynamically. This design is brilliant for speed, but it creates a binary ownership experience. Either you have a pristine, expensive example, or you have a nightmare that is being dumped for a fraction of the market rate. The cheap M20Js that flood the bottom of the market are suffering from issues that are nearly impossible to correct cost-effectively. The first is the fuel tanks. Moonies do not use rubber bladders. They use a wet wing design, where the aluminum structure itself is the tank, sealed with a specialized sealant. Over decades, this sealant dries out, cracks, and leaks. Resealing a Mooney tank is a miserable, labor-intensive job that involves stripping the wing interior and reapplying toxic chemicals in tight spaces. It costs thousands of dollars per side. Many owners defer this, leading to fuel smells in the cabin and blue stains on the wings. When a buyer sees a cheap Mooney, they're often looking at a $15,000 tank job immediately after purchase. More critically, the steel cage construction is a double-edged sword. If the aircraft has had window leaks or door seal failures that went unnoticed, which is common in bargain planes that have sat outside, water seeps into the insulation and sits against the steel tubes. This causes corrosion from the inside out. You cannot easily see it during a standard pre-buy inspection without stripping the interior. A Mooney with a corroded roll cage is effectively scrap metal. The repair cost exceeds the value of the plane. Additionally, the landing gear utilizes a unique shock-absorbing biscuit or puck system. These rubber discs harden over time and must be replaced. It requires specialized tools and knowledge that many general A&P mechanics do not possess. A cheap M20J is almost guaranteed to have rock-hard gear pucks, leaking tanks, and potentially hidden structural rot. The market punishes these neglected units severely. While a pristine 201 commands a premium, the driver quality or neglected units have fallen off a cliff in value because pilots have realized that bringing a bad Mooney back to life is financial suicide. You are better off paying double for a good one than buying a cheap one, and that reality has crushed the resale value of the lower tier, making them look like tempting bargains to the uneducated buyer who only sees the speed stats. 3. Piper Malibu. When Piper introduced the PA-46 Malibu, it was nothing short of a revolution. It was the first clean-sheet, pressurized, cabin-class, single-engine piston aircraft. It promised to carry a pilot and passengers in pressurized comfort above the weather, cruising at altitudes and speeds that used to require a twin-engine aircraft, but with the fuel economy of a single. It sounds like the perfect airplane, and on paper it is. However, the early Malibus have developed a reputation that has hammered their resale value, making them deceptively cheap for the capability they offer. The core of the problem is that Piper was trying to make a piston engine do a job that is really meant for a turbine. The Continental TSIO 520 engines fitted to the early Malibus operate under tremendous stress. They are turbocharged, run hot, and are pulling a heavy, pressurized hull through thin air. The cooling design on the early models was notoriously marginal. This led to a plague of cylinder cracks, top-end overhauls, and engine failures. The engine management required to keep a Malibu happy is precise and unforgiving. A pilot used to a Cessna 182 cannot just jump into a Malibu and slam the throttle forward. Doing so will melt the engine components in short order. This fragility led to a high accident rate in the early years, not necessarily due to the airframe, but due to engine failures and pilot error in managing the complex systems. Furthermore, the aircraft systems are incredibly complex for a single. The hydraulic landing gear, the pressurization outflow valves, the air conditioning, the de-icing boots. It is an airliner crammed into a small package. When these systems age, they break, and they are Piper parts, which means they are expensive. The early Malibus also garnered a reputation as runway hogs. They require a lot of asphalt to get off the ground and get over a 50-foot obstacle, especially when heavy. But the final nail in the coffin for the Malibu's value is insurance. Because of the high hull value, the complexity, and the history of in-flight breakups and engine failures, insurers demand high premiums and rigorous training requirements. For many pilots, the insurance quote is the deal breaker. Consequently, you see early PA-46 airframes listed for prices that seem incredibly low for a pressurized aircraft. Sellers are trying to offload them because the cost of maintaining the engine and the cost of insuring the risk have made the airplane untenable for the average owner. It is a cheap plane that requires a rich owner's wallet and a professional pilot's discipline, a mismatch that the market has corrected by slashing the price. 2. Beechcraft Starship. The Beechcraft Starship is not just a plane, it is a tragedy of aerospace ambition. If you see one for sale, the price will likely be confusingly low for a twin turboprop made of advanced composites with a canard design that looks like it flew straight out of Star Wars. The Model 2000 Starship was meant to be the future of aviation. Designed by the legendary Burt Rutan, it was supposed to replace the King Air and revolutionize business travel. Instead, it became one of the biggest commercial flops in history, and today, owning one is a logistical nightmare that drives the price down to bargain basement levels for a turboprop. The Starship failed because it was too heavy, too slow compared to jets, and too expensive to build. But for the modern buyer, the issue is support. Beechcraft, now Textron, essentially disowned the aircraft. In fact, in the early 2000s, the company determined that supporting the tiny fleet of Starships was so economically unviable that they started buying them back and destroying them. They literally crushed them and burned them to ensure they would never have to sell a spare part for them again. A handful of owners refused to sell, and those are the airframes that exist today. If you buy a Starship, you are completely on your own. There are no parts catalogs. There are no authorized service centers. If a windshield cracks, if a landing gear actuator fails, or if a specialized composite bracket snaps, you cannot order a replacement. You have to find an engineer to design a fix, get it approved by the FAA, which is a nightmare in itself, and fabricate it from scratch. The avionics are another disaster. The Starship used an early integrated glass cockpit called the Collins AMS 850. It was cutting edge in 1989, but today it is ancient technology. The CRT screens burn out, the processors fail, and there are almost no spares left in the world. Upgrading the panel is incredibly difficult due to the integration with the ship's systems. So, why is the price ridiculous? Because despite being a twin turboprop that offers a ride smoother than any other plane in the sky, it is technically an orphan. You are buying a museum piece that you are allowed to fly, provided nothing breaks. The moment something significant fails, the airplane becomes a static display. The market reflects this existential risk. You can buy a Starship for a fraction of the cost of a comparable King Air, but the King Air will fly for another 50 years. The Starship might be grounded tomorrow forever by a single broken microchip. On the Cessna 177 Cardinal, the Cessna 177 Cardinal was supposed to be the Cessna 172 killer. It was sleek, it had no wing struts to block the view, it sat lower to the ground, and it looked fast. Cessna intended it to replace the Skyhawk as the premier family airplane and trainer. Instead, the early models of the Cardinal, specifically the 1968 versions, crashed and burned in the court of public opinion so badly that they dragged the value of the entire model line down for decades. If you look at the classifieds today, you will often find early Cardinals selling for significantly less than a Skyhawk or a Piper Cherokee of the same vintage, despite looking much more modern. This pricing disparity is the scar tissue of a disastrous launch. The 1968 Cardinal was underpowered. Cessna installed a 150-horsepower Lycoming O320 engine, the same power as the lighter 172, but the Cardinal was heavier and had a different wing profile. The result was anemic performance. The takeoff roll was long and scary for pilots used to the sprightly 172. The climb rate was sluggish, but the real reputation killer was the Cardinal hop. The aircraft used a stabilator, a fully moving tailplane, instead of a traditional elevator. It was extremely sensitive. Pilots trained on the docile 172 would flare for landing, over-control the sensitive tail, and enter a pilot-induced oscillation, PIO, slamming the nose wheel into the runway. This porpoising led to broken firewalls and bent nose gears. It scared students and instructors alike. Although Cessna fixed these issues in later years by adding slots to the stabilator and putting in a larger 180-horsepower engine, the damage was done. The Cardinal name became synonymous with underpowered and tricky to land. Furthermore, the early fixed-pitch propeller combined with the 150 HP engine meant that if you got into a high-density altitude situation, the airplane simply wouldn't climb. It became a safety hazard for the uninformed. Today, the maintenance on these early birds is also a headache. The cantilever wing, no struts, requires rigorous inspection of the carry-through spars for corrosion, a fix that can cost more than the plane is worth. The doors open almost 90 degrees, which is great for entry, but they catch the wind and can be sprung, leading to expensive airframe repairs. The market price for early Cardinals remains stubbornly low because the stigma has never fully washed away. Experienced pilots know that unless it has the engine upgrade and the tail mods, it is a frustrating airplane to fly. It represents a bargain that usually results in the owner wishing they had just bought the boring, strut-braced 172 instead. These 5 aircraft serve as a brutal reminder that in aviation, the purchase price is merely the cover charge for a very expensive club. The market, in its cold efficiency, prices these planes low for a reason. It is not an accident, and it is not a charity. It is a calculation of risk, maintenance hours, and frustration. The Beechcraft Duke offers a limousine ride for a bus ticket price, but charges you a fortune for gas and repairs. The Mooney offers speed, but demands a specialized mechanic and a pristine airframe. The Malibu offers pressurized comfort, but threatens you with fragile engine management. The Starship offers exclusivity, but abandons you without support. And the Cardinal offers style, but delivers underwhelming performance and handling quirks. When you see these planes listed for ridiculous prices, remember that the previous owners are not giving them away because they hate money. They are selling them because they have done the math. They have realized that the cost of keeping these machines airworthy exceeds the joy of flying them. If you are tempted to buy one, go in with your eyes wide open and your wallet even wider. Otherwise, you might find yourself as the next motivated seller, dropping the price just to make the headache go away. Thanks for watching Aviation India. If you want more honest aviation breakdowns and want to learn how to spot the gems from the lemons, make sure to like, subscribe, and stay with us for more deep dives into the best and worst airplanes ever built.